I'm excited to be here with both of you. This is the first time that we've had a conversation with three of us. So, the first couple of episodes, Eve and I have been having chats about different things, but now today we've got Valeyne, who is one of my most beloved, most trusted friends, colleagues, senior faculty members here at Awaken, as well as an Awaken alumni. And Val and I go way back to when we were both studying coaching together back in 2009, 2010. So we're going to get vulnerable here today. We're talking about spirituality, and one thing that is very present for all three of us here is just this little feeling of vulnerability around that word spirituality, because sometimes even with the closest friends and family, it can be really such a tender place because there's so much about belonging and uniqueness and wilderness that's wrapped up in that word spirituality. And I think it's a big deal. I actually had someone call me recently and say, how important is the word spirituality to you at Awaken? And do you want to actually even keep using that word? Because this person was feeling very uncomfortable and wondering if they even wanted to put the word Awaken up on their LinkedIn, because in the corporate world, it might look kind of strange that we do say spirituality front and center regularly. And what does that even mean? And then maybe an hour after that person called, I had someone else call and be like, I'm so drawn to Awaken because you have the word spirituality front and center. And so we really get that whole thing. It's like it draws us, and at the same time, it makes us feel scared to talk about it when we might have different thoughts and feelings and beliefs than people that are really close to us. So I'll just say that as we open the conversation. How are you two feeling coming into talking about spirituality together?
Oh, I'm just so in awe about you opening the space in such a beautiful and light way, because it allows me to also see it as like it's not either or, it's like the whole scale. Sometimes it's like I feel it and I feel so connected that it's the most natural thing. And sometimes, considering like who might be listening, it can feel actually very scary to share, because it's spirituality is also so misunderstood, I feel, at least in the way that I perceive it and the way that it's sometimes put in other contexts. So when you just mentioned that example of like this woman asking you, like in the corporate context, for example, like it feels like there's no space for spirituality in this, whereas actually we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and like bringing this like maybe putting aside the woo-woo thing about spirituality that might be some people put at center stage, but reconnecting to what spirituality is at the core allows it to be actually very much part of the corporate context as well. And so I really enjoyed that example as an opening. Thank you, Christi. That's where I'm at. How about you, Val?
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks to you both. I mean, first, I'm excited to be your first guest on the Awaken podcast. It feels deeply meaningful and important. And I just am, if there's anybody I'd want to have a conversation about spirituality with, it would be the two of you. And it feels like a cozy, I'm imagining us in the same country, in the same room, cozied up to some fireplace with some tea, and we're just having a conversation about it. And I think, the word spirituality to me, it's one of the things that initially, I mean, obviously I've known Christi for many, many years, but being part of Awaken, this is a big reason why I want to be a part of Awaken, is because there is such an honoring of thyself and an honoring of a trust, a deep trust and an inner knowing of ourselves and the divine love that's within and all around us. And that to me is a core foundation of spirituality. And yet the word, like you said, Eve, can be so misconstrued. We can get caught up in it being a practice or a religion or a belief system in and of itself, when really, to me, it's about the coming home to yourself and the inner alignment of your inner knowing and who you are and how that shapes how you act and think and feel and behave in the world and how you love the world. And I think that's the beauty of our corporate places need that. Our homes need that. Our friendships need that, I think. So I'm just really, thank you for opening a tender space to talk about something that is so deeply personal too. It's really cool.
Yeah. I love how you use the word connection so many times. I don't even think on purpose, but as you were talking, Eve, and to me, that's such a big part of what spirituality is. And then Val, when you were mentioning religion, I think there's this there's kind of this bifurcation where people either think it's equated with religion or it's the opposite of religion. And that can be a tricky space to navigate, because I remember when I first started studying coaching, I was raised in a very deeply religious household, and it was pretty much the core, the center, the focal point of everything. And members of my family were all expected to do Christian missions work, as that was just very, very highly valued. And so then when I started studying coaching, it felt really scary because it shook up really the foundation of my whole worldview. I was raised with heaven and hell, good and evil, life and death. It felt very serious, these beliefs. And then when I got into coaching, it was all this about acceptance, non-judgment, openness to other experiences, beginner's mind, freedom of choice, allowing all a diversity of perspectives. And I remember being really, really attracted to it and thinking this feels so nice. This is wonderful. And at the same time being petrified, oh no, I need to run back to what I know. And so I did. And so after I studied, ICF based coaching was still kind of within the realm of what was okay to me ish. But then when I studied NLP, and it was a lot of psychology, it was oh, this is really at odds to everything. I can't go here. And so what I did is I went back and I took a spiritual direction course. And so it was a 2-year course, and I was really hoping okay, this course is going to get me back home. It's going to ground me in my religious beliefs, and I'm going to somehow be able to integrate this coaching stuff with the truth. And it didn't quite work that way, because I was studying with Christians, but Jesuits, and I had grown up Calvinist. And so, I don't know if anybody knows the nitty gritty between this and that, details of what people believe and don't believe about the Bible and authority and this different things. But even going supposedly back home to something similar to what I grew up with, there was such an openness. And I was reading the Dalai Lama is best friends with Catholic, whatever he is, bishop or something at the time, Desmond Tutu. And, seeing Catholics, Hindus, Muslim, really the big leaders having these really deep, rich conversations. And I was ooh, there's something bigger, deeper beneath religions that we can share. And so I did not get more settled. I got less settled, and I got more scared about, it's all flying up in the air now. So I don't know about you guys, what your journey's been like with not knowing, not being sure of truth so much, and how that's been for you, if it's been a thing.
Christi. I deeply resonate with what you share, albeit different denominational upbringing. But I would have said, I grew up in primarily a non-denominational Christian-based church here, and I'm based in the United States. Grew up in very rural, northwestern Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, and I don't live there now. I live between the states of Illinois and Florida, but you think of your upbringing and how it shapes you, and it shapes your belief system, your worldview. Like what I had access to and exposure to was really a belief system that I would describe now as, goodness, I was really lucky to be born in the country I was in with the one religion that was studied that was deemed the right religion. And I began asking questions from a really young age about heaven and hell. And, well, if there's a way to avoid that scary place, then how do I do that? And I recognize now that I've gone through this process of, I've used the word deconstruction. I think that might be more of a buzzy word that I hear these days, but it's still a deeply meaningful process to me, as I've, for the past few years, similar to what you're sharing, Christi, of like through coaching, your eyes become opened through interacting with people from different worldviews, different communities, different backgrounds and upbringing. I started this process of deconstruction, which to me is it's really an audit of what you believe, an audit of the presumptions about an invisible reality and why you believe what you believe. And I have been in that process now, just living in the questions for once and not being afraid to do so. And like you shared, Christi, I call it my spiritual awakening. I just don't know another word for it. I just don't. It is, to me, it's like an awakening of, oh my gosh, is what I believed all these years what I believe? And why do I believe it? And where did it come from? And that is scary. That first moment of questioning is like, no, I can't question that, because that is the basis of my entire belief system, and the entire thing will crumble. All of it will fall. And that's terrifying, because that means my sense of belonging is in question. Will I have the community? Will I be accepted? Will I now find myself in a minority and feel other? And yeah, so I just deeply resonate with what you're sharing here, Christi. And I thank you for sharing that, because I think it's maybe more common than we talk about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How about you, Eve?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I feel like I had a slightly different experience in growing up, because even though I was growing up with Christian religion, for my parents, it wasn't that big thing, or like there wasn't so much load coming with it, like belief systems. It was very much like, there is something, we sometimes go to church to celebrate the festivities, but there was not that much of dedication, as I hear from both of your families in that sense. What I knew, though, was that one thing that I really wanted to receive from that community of Christians and didn't receive in a very painful time of my life was when my dad got sick, and in the same year my really, really dear grandma died, that I was like seeking for some kind of stability, from some kind of like sense of being held. And I certainly didn't receive this in the community and in the church that I was growing up in. So for me, there was like this question of like, why am I even doing this if like in the most painful phases of my life, I cannot rely on receiving the support from that specific community? Like I had other friends and other, groups where I could reach out to, but specifically from church, I didn't receive that support. And so what I find really interesting in what you were sharing, Christi, also is this: what is above? What is the unifying thing that is above religion? Because this is like has been a very interesting discovery for me, traveling around the world. Like I studied in Shanghai for a semester abroad, but I also went to South America, and I'm very connected also to Egyptian traditions. So it's really interesting how my path has like led me not only to different countries, but also to connect with the indigenous traditions of these different cultures. And it's really interesting to notice that there is so much that they have in common, and that this knowledge is spread all over the world, and that as much as like in religion, there is this desire to claim the truth. Like, we know better, we know what's right, we know, like, this is the thing. As much like, it's not really helpful to be focusing so much on the separation and to try to be superior to one another, whereas there's so much all these religions and ancient traditions actually have in common. So that has been a really interesting discovery in my own journey.
You asked a question, Eve, about what is that one unifying factor that goes beyond religion. And for me, it was such a shock. I remember there was a time when I started really questioning heaven and hell as a specific concept. And I think that started really, really early. I remember when I was in high school, there was this woman who would come to my house maybe once a month or something. And we were in a small group of girls who were being kind of discipled, as they called it, by this older woman. And she was walking us through Calvinist theology and how in that worldview, God chooses some people to go to heaven, but most people are predestined for eternal conscious torment. And that was just the way it was. Everybody was supposed to believe that. And that's just, I had heard it so many thousands of times that when this woman was like teaching me that in my family's basement, it was like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I already know that. But one of my friends from high school was a Methodist, which is just a different Christian denomination, but she went to the same Christian school as me. And she stood up and she said, wait a second. Are you saying that God gives some people a favor, but other people have no chance? And so the teacher was kind of trying to soften it or say it more nicely. And this girlfriend of mine just stood up and she said, I don't want that kind of favor from God then. I'm only going to heaven if everybody is. She got up and she slammed the door and walked out. And I was like, lucky you get to do that? And is she going to hell? And like that kind of started this whole like, wait a second here. She's still going to Christian school and she thinks she's going to heaven, but she doesn't believe this. And so, I could feel that whole like something going on in my brain. But at some point when I did, it was kind of in maybe my late 20s that I was like, I don't know for sure, but I don't think that if there's a God, there is something called eternal conscious torment or hell or whatever you want to call it. But then it was like, well, if I'm not in this thing out of fear, what if nobody's going to hell? What if it doesn't exist? Then what's left? And it just felt like this free fall. It felt like worse than the fear of hell was the fear of not knowing. But what I fell into was love. And that's hard. Because once your whole paradigm is, I'm not doing anything out of fear anymore, I'm doing it out of love, that's when you understand how hard it is to love people. And you're confronted with like, ooh, I got a lot of hate and a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of other stuff to contend with very practically in being in relationship and connection with other people. And that's lifelong learning how to love. And to me, that's what connects all true spirituality is, are we willing to be here learning to love each other? with all of it.
With all of our stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Christi. I again resonate with this story because I thought the same thing when Eve was just pondering this hypothetical question. What is the thing that connects all of the religions and all of, right, these belief systems? And it really is love. I think at the highest level, like that's what's trying to be communicated and taught. And we've twisted a lot of theologies and things in a way that maybe serves humans a little bit better, but isn't necessarily rooted in pure love. We do it in the name of love because we think we're maybe helping somebody or saving them from some scary place. And yet, is that really rooted in love, or is that out of our own need to support others, to be with us for an eternity? Like, that's just a whole other thing I think we could go down. But I just really, appreciate, Eve, what you're saying here about it doesn't really serve us well to try to figure out, like, what is the right one? What is, a mentor had said to me a few years back when I first realized I was having a spiritual awakening, and I was like, what is happening in my world? Wow, everything's being turned upside down. And she just said, it's not that, the religion that you grew up in is wrong. It's that it's incomplete. And I really thought that, that feels so true for maybe all religions, is that it's just the completion of it is what is pure love. Interesting.
I read a book many years back called The Critical Journey, which was really pivotal to me. And it actually was written in two forms. There was one that was the religious form of the book, and then there was another version for just use in secular, non-religious, just this is how people grow up. And I talked about, I think it was 5 or 6 levels of spiritual growth. And so the first one was wonder. It was just like, oh, wow. Like you could connect with the intricacies of a daffodil or anything really in nature. Look at the stars, so any grandeur and size or beauty, and say, wow, there's something gorgeously loving and amazing here, and I want to know more. And so that's kind of step one. And I think any of us is lucky to have some of those moments regularly. And then step 2 is community. And so then you want to connect with who else is noticing the gorgeousness and brutality and all the things that are here with us on the planet. And so that's where a lot of people who have a religion will start going to the temple or the mosque or the church, and they go there for community in quotes. They want to find like-minded people who are just like, wow, we're connected to something gorgeous. And so they do that. And then step 3, they go into leadership. And so, if they're at a mega church, then they're going to sing in the choir, or they're going to be an altar boy, or they're going to lead a small group, or, whatever it is, but they're going to take on some leadership. And that's where people get stuck, is at stage 3. And they don't feel like something's missing because that's all most religions will do. And that's already really awesome. Like, it's wonderful to have awe and wonder and beauty and love and community and leadership. And then you think you're done. Except, like you said, Val, it's not complete. And so step 4 is the dark night of the soul. It's the, oh crap, this isn't everything and it doesn't work and some of this doesn't make sense. And boy, these people are a pain in the butt that I have to spend so much time. And everything starts getting very shaky and people have their midlife crisis. And it's often at midlife that you hit stage 4. And there can be a lot of even suicidal ideation going on, and like, I'm standing at the edge of a cliff and what do I do? And it can feel like death. Mm-hmm. And then there's this slow climbing out of the hole, re-emerging into life and being like, oh, I don't think maybe leadership is that important. And I'm willing to brave the wilderness and I'm willing to leave the community to experience like a deeper something, but it still feels very unstable. And then the sixth phase is when you're just living in love regularly and you can see everyone at all the stages with a loving eye and not be like, oh, poo poo, those religious people don't know anything. You're like, awesome, that's wonderful. I'm like, so glad you're a leader and you know that it's not everything, but you're happy for them where they are and you're not having to, like, maybe in stage 5, you're still combating those religious people don't know what they're talking about. Whereas stage 6 is when you're kind of fully complete in just bathing in the wonder and loving kindness of the universe on a regular basis. And then what happens is someone you love dies or something else, and you start the cycle all over again. You go through a period of grief or whatever it is, and you can be at stage 5 and at stage 2. Like you might still want community, but like for the Awaken community, for example, it used to be for me that community meant Christian churches of people who believe the same thing. But now if I'm going back to community, it has a lot more to do with inviting dissent, inviting the beloved community where you love your oppressor, you love people who think differently from you, you love yourself with all the hard parts. And then you learn to build community based on true community, not based on only shared belief. So I'm doing a lot of talking.
Christi, it's beautiful. It's beautiful because what I hear is such an inclusion of diversity of thought, inviting dissent. To me, that is the beloved community. That's true community, that when we can be in community with one another and hold, so what if you believe something different? It doesn't mean you have to be apart from me. We're still one and the same. We still are love. We still are together. And I think it's such a beautiful thing for me to be thinking about. I've been reading a book by Deepak Chopra, similar, where it talks about, he actually describes 7 levels of spiritual growth and development. Mm-hmm. And I've been really resonating in how we respond when we're in different levels. And I've been asking this question of myself of like, wait, is it possible to be in different levels at different times? And it really feels true for me. Like there are parts in my own braving the wilderness and making that trek and really having the bravery and the courage to do that, where I recognize, man, I'm constantly coming home to myself. And yet there's also this deep need still of like acceptance and like being loved in community. And when you are feeling a rejection or a sense of like, I don't belong because and I'm trying to think of like a real practical example of this, or how it might show up in the belief system that I was raised with, is if you proclaim that you're questioning, like I imagine, Christi, for you, the girl that stood up and said, wait, I don't want that favor from that God, if that's what's happening. That's like a proclamation of, I don't align with that. And so in the community that I grew up in, if that were to happen, then it would all of a sudden be it takes a village, like everybody surround together and like, let's pray for this person and get them back on the right path because they're lost. They're the lost sheep that's strayed away. And that can feel really isolating and traumatizing for the person who is communicating that they are having a shift and they're just wanting help to understand that. And yet but you're straying away and you're now wrong and you're in danger, and that's super scary. And so I can see where at that point, maybe it's kind of like Joseph Campbell describes the hero or the heroine's journey of like, you've just stepped over that line. You're close enough after just crossing over that line where you can say, okay, that crap's too scary. I'm going right back here because that feels a lot more safe for me right now. Oh, woe is me, steering my ways, right? And so I've been through this cycle a few times, and it feels like every time you get a little more empowered, a little more trusting of love and what that actually means. And yeah, it's a journey. It's a braving the wilderness journey.
Wow, this really resonates with me. I feel you so much on that, Val, because also when you shared Christy, I was like thinking like, where am I on this? And I totally resonate with that thought that you can be on many different levels at the same time, because I definitely think that right now for me is probably the second time that I'm going through this dark night of the soul. It feels like a very heavy phase in my life, but at the same time, I'm totally like all the consciousness and all the processes that I did before really made me capable to be showing up here and like really getting all the good things, teachings out of all the things that are happening right now. And I also think that the what I love about Awaken community is that it's a place of inclusivity where like your worth. I think that's actually the thing. Like we have aligned values to some degree where it says like how we think of humans and their infinite worthiness and how it doesn't relate to where you're from, what you believe in, what you do in your life. Like all this can be so different, but there is this unifying factor that we just all like, we don't challenge it because it's so true for all of us. And I feel like this is also the thing that enables us to be present with the dissent, to be able to stay there and listen to one another, even though we might have a different opinion, because we believe like whatever you believe, you're still infinitely worthy.
It reminds me of a story my friend Annie told me once. She leads Camino walks, and so you're going for 2 months just walking across, France and Spain, um, and when they do their walk, no one is allowed to tell anyone else their story for the whole first week of the walk. You're allowed to say only what's happened in the last 24 hours. So, did you sleep well? Did you eat anything this morning? Did you get a shower? Do you have a blister on your toe? And they're really just only speaking about the present. And so, once you connect as animal bodies and as human very physicality, walking across a mountaintop together, then in week 2, when you can start saying, yeah, I just got divorced, or, I just experienced a death, or I'm rumbling with anxiety and my kid's not talking to me anymore, and whatever else is in your story, something about judgments just disappears. And I really took that to heart when we create community at Awaken. I find it so enjoyable. Like I interview everybody one-on-one. So I already know a little bit about people before we get them introduced. And we have this email introduction before class starts. And it's very carefully constructed questions. We might ask people things like, when have you been the outsider in the group? Or just what time of day is it going to be when you call in? And what's your experience with the divine, if any? And so we're asking these questions that are at different levels of intimacy. And so then people show up in class and we start looking at image and metaphor and position, and we have these deep conversations from day one in class. And it's only later that the hairdresser finds out that she's coaching the vice president of the big pharmaceutical company. But by then, who cares? Like all those patriarchal, hierarchical, who's worth more than who stuff is evidentially irrelevant. And then we can all kind of feel it when it starts cropping up, and we're like, oh, wait, this is weird. We're all in the same room together from different countries. And you start to feel like, wow, I've been living with hierarchy and patriarchy and really wacky ideas about human worth that are so unnecessary. And we're living it. We don't come out and teach it. We just do it. And then it's really interesting to see what happens.
There's something so beautiful about being just present with people in the now. and not having an attached, thing. Like, I just love the story of your friend Annie on the Camino and how that experience goes for the entire first week. And that is that in what you describe here at Awaken has been exactly my experience being in the community and now being on faculty. Like, it's just so cool when we can invite people just to show up as they are now with who they are now and be loved in that space. I say it a lot, Christy, but thanks for creating such a community. It's so beautiful to be a part of. It's a really special place.
Thank you both for creating it with me. It's all of us. It really is. My metaphor for Awaken these days is the murmuration. Like we're all kind of carried by the wind. If you ever seen a murmuration of starlings, and there's thousands of them flying together, but there's no leader. It's not a cult. It's a migration, or it's a murmuration. It's a joy of like, we're all going to be carried by the wind and move together. And then if a group wants to break off and go fly somewhere else for a while, they can, and they can rejoin the murmuration if they want to. But if there's one thing I would want to avoid at Awaken, it would be any kind of like cult leadership or any like, because if we're all infinitely worthy, we're all equal, even with different roles and things. And so anytime there's this kind of a hint of, oh my goodness, this person is so amazing, which I do that too. I have so many people that I put on pedestals and I think they're so much better than I am and all that. It's really important to me to remind all of us that we are all infinitely worthy and all infinitely valuable. And there's no way that, I happen to be really good at inviting people to stuff and I love doing it. And I used to feel really bad about that. Like, oh, you're not supposed to be such a leader or so bossy or so pushy or whatever. But slowly but surely I'm loving myself well enough to say, yeah, I'm really good at that. And it's a gift. It's something that I'm meant to be doing. And it doesn't mean I'm better than anyone else. It just means that's something I'm good at, is creating structures where people can be invited and belong. So good for me.
I think this is so beautiful. I have so many thoughts that like thought trains that I could go down. First,
Yeah.
I want to just share that what you just described with the birds, like I saw, how are you calling it?
A murmuration.
A murmuration of goose flying over me at like at least 100 yesterday when I was
Yeah.
at the beach, and I was just like in awe of observing it so closely because I saw it from afar, but I never was like underneath it, and it was so interesting to see exactly how you described it. Like there was no leader, and somehow without even communicating, they just like shifted the shape and went to a different direction and then shifted again, and it was like, wow, they are all so connected. This is really interesting and this is really beautiful to watch. And I think like nature has so much to teach us on that level, on like what spirituality is, or what this like sense of wonder, this like divine spark that is in everything. Like if we just allow it and be present with it, to be witnessed, then it can teach us so many beautiful lessons. Yeah. And then what I wanted to share about the spaces that you create is that I think it's so valuable to have this container where people really are allowed to share their vulnerability before they talk about all the, I mean, stereotypical like labels or what they do in their life. Because I think if you would do it the other way around, like the fear of being less worthy would create so much barriers that you possibly wouldn't even be able to go to that place of the heart and share so vulnerably. But if you're really meeting like human to human, heart to heart, it also allows us to show our weaknesses or our vulnerable, share our vulnerable stories, and be received and be seen and heard and felt in that experience, which is also really connecting. I think connection is actually my word. Yeah.
I wish we had a word cloud for this podcast. It's like we're talking about the word spirituality and trying to get a feel for what that is. Is it religion? Is it love? Is it nature? But we're starting to kind of develop this murmuration of a word cloud here of like connection and humanness and nature and bodies and like I don't know what else you guys are wanting to put in. Love. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure there's an AI tool that can take this recording and give you exactly that. Our
I will look out
murmuration
for
word
that.
cloud.
Because people are always asking, like you say spirituality front and center all the time with everything you do at Awaken, and it either makes them very uncomfortable or very excited. There's rarely a neutral response about that word. But then getting into what does it mean? And to me, it's the most practical word on earth. I mean, it's how you live every day, and it's what you're creating. It's what you're part of, co-creating. And it's hard to put that into words because the fact that there is the word spirituality implies that it's something separate, something different from everyday life, but it's not. It's infused in everything. So it is a hard word to describe.
Yeah, I think, and the bias also, at least in my environment, exists in the sphere of that people think that it's something like religion, like above, like the heaven, the light, like something not being able to grasp or to see, but it requires a lot of faith. And this, like I feel like this is kind of where the mind split in terms of like some people totally dedicate themselves towards it and some people really get scared of it and I'm like, I'm out of here. And I think that's what I also love about how we see spirituality, at least at Awaken, in this like embodied experience, that it's actually very much here on earth in how we live, how we behave, how we sense our bodies, how we move. Like this is all part of it. It's not something that's out there. It's very much here and now. And that also helped me reframe the word spirituality in my world. Yeah.
Right. Like if you're coming at it, spirituality from a yoga perspective or something like that. I think yoga is also pretty integrated. But it could, someone was like, oh, it's this woo woo thing. Like, even in the imagery, sometimes I'll hire somebody to do some marketing for Awaken and they see spirituality. And the first thing they do is they start putting skies and clouds and everything. I'm like, no, we do boots on the ground. Like we want to see people wearing heavy boots walking on dirt with rocks. Like that's what spirituality is more about than like somebody like, oh, leaping off of up at the top of the mountain or something. That's not it. It's not just like, ooh, let's all sit here saying serenity now all day long. Like,
It almost requires a new word because of the associations that it has with it.
well, a lot of times I find myself saying spiritual practical alignment,
Love that.
which
Yeah.
takes a long time to say. And it's not even any more truthful because to me, spirituality is spiritual practical alignment, but maybe a few more words help people to understand that it's not pie in the sky or it's not just for some people and not for other people. Like you were saying, Eve, it's not, it's not like some people are spiritual and other people aren't. We're humans. We're spiritual beings here with animal bodies for a short period of time.
Yeah. It's inside of us and it's all around us and it's within. Not something we have to grasp for or work toward or achieve or strive for. It's not something outside of our grasp. It's within us.
It just is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And that's why to me, the most spiritual words that were ever spoken is just, I am. I am.
Yes. Yeah. In this book I'm reading, Christi, the 7th level of spiritual development is what we can say when we're more consistently in that phase is I am. I am.
Mhm.
And we see the connection within and all around. And it's just, it doesn't have to be defined as I am put in a word identifier. It's just I am. Just I am. It's like, I think of Jesus saying, it's the great I am, right? We can say, I am.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we're all invited to be part of the great I am.
Yeah. Mm. It's beautiful.
Does this feel like the right moment to close here, my friends?
Yeah. I feel like we could
It
talk
is.
about the subject in multiple phases and in multiple
Absolutely.
ways. Yeah.
That you could possibly take. But I think for now, I feel very complete. Yeah.
Mm. I do too. Thanks for opening the space for this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you both.